Are you curious to know the difference between a regular shoe and a minimal shoe? Well, I'm here to tell all. Hang on till the end of the video and I'll give you my top 3 tips to help you transition from a regular shoe to a minimal shoe. But first off, the 5 differences between a regular shoe and a minimal shoe. A regular shoe or a minimal shoe will have a 0 drop heel, which means there's no difference in height between the back of the shoe and the front of the shoe. A regular shoe, for example, this one here, has quite a high heel, and there's a big difference between the height of the heel and the height of the front of the shoe. Sometimes you hear minimal shoes being talked of as having a 3.5 drop. That means the heel is 3.5 millimeters in height, which is still a tiny heel compared to regular shoes, which might have 1 to 2 inches if it's a sports runner. So it's a big difference in terms of height. Either way, you want to have a lower heel, almost to 0 over time if you want to have a minimal shoe. Secondly, you want to have a big toe box, which means your toes can splay or spread out when they're in the shoe. You don't want them to be squashed. That's a big difference for a barefoot shoe, to let your feet move naturally. The third thing is regarding the sole. So with a minimal shoe, you can often roll the sole right up pretty extreme, like so, versus a regular shoe doesn't move very much. But it's not only lengthways or widthways, it's also this way. So the flexible sole ideally should move this way as well, which is not really possible with a regular shoe. There's limited movement there. The fourth point, let me think about this, is the toe spring. So the front of the shoe here has a lift up where the toes are normally resting, and that's pretty rigid, which means your toes are kept in an upward position for a long period of time. This is not good for the muscles in your feet. It's called a toe spring. In contrast, a minimal shoe may also have a slight toe spring. So the front of the shoe moves away from the ground, but it's not rigid. It's very flexible. So that's the thing to look out for. It might have a toe spring, but it's flexible. The fifth point then is that a minimal shoe should be attached to the sole, which might sound a bit weird, but if you think about a flip-flop, the average flip-flop doesn't have an ankle strap, which means your toes muscles have to grip to keep the shoe on, which is not what you want because it'll over tense the muscles in your feet. So if you're looking for a flip-flop style kind of shoe, you want one that has an ankle strap like this, which means your foot is attached to the sole of the foot and your muscles can do the work, the feet muscles can do the work that they're supposed to do to keep your shoes on without worrying about gripping in any way. So there are the 5 differences between a regular shoe and a minimal shoe. You don't necessarily have to buy a minimal shoe or a barefoot shoe. You might have already shoes in your wardrobe that have some of the attributes of a minimal shoe. For example, I have an old pair of Skechers here and it has about, I'd say 2.5 of the attributes of the 5 I just talked about. First off, the heel is pretty low. It's not 0, but it is pretty low, which is good for a modern day shoe. It has a pretty good wide toe box. It's not, it's wide enough for my feet, maybe not for everybody's, but for me it's wide enough. The sole is pretty flexible. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. There's not much give this way though. And it has a very high toe spring. So not perfect, but you don't need to throw out all your shoes at the moment. You can be looking for some shoes that might have some of the attributes of a minimal shoe without having to go to the expense of buying the ideal minimal shoe. So now my top 3 tips for transitioning, and this is very important. So if you think about your shoe as an orthotic, whether you wear orthotics or not, the shoe itself is an orthotic, and you've probably been wearing regular shoes for many decades. So the shoe has cast your foot and your feet muscles into a certain position. So if you just cast it off, like you're wearing an arm, you've broken your arm, you're wearing a cast for 6 weeks. At the end of the 6th week, you take the cast off. You don't just go straight to the gym and start pumping weights. You start mobilizing those muscles very gently, strengthening them and mobilizing them to get the strength up so that you can start lifting weights with your arm, for example. The same is true for your feet. You don't just get rid of your regular shoes, transition straight into minimal, and then just start working everywhere. You may develop some injuries. So my top 3 tips for transitioning are: 1, to do it gradually and to do it slowly. So if you're used to wearing 6-inch heels, this is going to take longer than if you're just used to wearing a 1-inch court shoe. So take your time doing it. If you're wear your newer shoe, if it's a lower heel or a minimal shoe, for short periods of time around the house, then down the street, then around the block, then maybe take it for a walk, and notice how your body reacts to it. You might have neck pain, you might have hip pain, you might be slamming your heels on the ground. So be aware of what's going on, and I would say walk slower than you normally do. This is a big difference to your body, even if it seems tiny. Transitioning to a lower heel has a big effect on your body all over. So transition slowly and gently. Number 2, alternate your shoes. Don't just throw out all your regular shoes overnight. You're going to do this gradually. And I like to alternate regularly. So at the beginning, when I was transitioning, if I was going for a walk or a hike, I would maybe start in my earth runners and my sandals, but I would always bring my old runners with me initially, so I could swap over maybe halfway through the hike, or whenever I started feeling like the minimal shoe was too much on my body, I would have another pair of shoes to transition into. And this is the top tip. It'll save you a lot of heartache and allow you to progress sustainably over time. Thirdly, you want to prepare your feet for this transition. It might look like a tiny difference to go from this height to 0, but it's a big change for your body. So you want to prepare the muscles in your feet, which means strengthening them and mobilizing them. A good way to work on it is to, for example, is to roll the soles of your feet with a soft squash ball. Do it gently and be mindful of what it feels like. If you want other exercises to work on your feet, you can check out my Happy Feet mini course. I'll put the link in the text for this video, or you can go to my website. It's AnnetteCashel.com, and you'll find the mini courses on that website. I hope you found this useful. Any questions, just let me know. Take care for now.